All right. This time, the counter is going.
And the mics are right.
The mics are right.
We're
the
gonna
counter
do
is
this.
going.
All right, so now we have to start all over again.
Well, which is going to be interesting because the first topic can be the topic that my mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hey everybody, welcome back. Another episode of Time Expired with guys whose time is not quite expired yet. I'm Dave Hovde.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And this is our, third effort of doing this particular podcast.
So yesterday we tried this. We did the entire podcast, 30 minutes worth.
Right.
You got up to check it. Nothing was recorded.
No, not true. 2 seconds were recorded. And then...
But not enough to watch.
So my fault, 100% my fault. So we started this over just a few seconds ago. And then in the middle of a thought that Richard was having, I'm like, wait a second.
And so you had the mics wrong.
The mics weren't on.
So
but you know what's funny? Like
my mic's on, your mic's on,
right.
The mics are...
Well, the thing is, what's interesting is that you were thinking, and the whole time where I should have been listening to you, I was in worry the whole time.
Okay.
So
you have no idea what I said, and I can start all over again.
Yeah, no, and we're going to start all over again. So okay. I'm a screw up. I don't think this is big news to anybody out there.
I think let's put it this way. You're a really good meteorologist. You are learning how to be a production assistant.
Right. Well, if we could
that's
just,
really true.
If we could just pan the camera around to see all the production staff working on our podcast with us.
Which would be zero.
Yeah, exactly. Who's the producer?
You.
Who's the director?
You.
And who publishes it?
You.
Okay. There you go. So it's all my fault. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, well,
I just sit here.
Just stop watching it.
If you remember the first one, I'm the guy who sits next to Dave.
So we're going to jump into topic number one, which is it's fall, it's here, but it's not just the fact that we're transitioning into fall. It's that the town changes so much, and you're kind of on really the precipice of it all because you work here, but you also work over at Cal Poly. And you're a man about town. You happen to be right down there in downtown.
Yeah. So always when the students start again, there's this big surge. And it's not just a surge of population, right? Because we have the tourists over the summer that kind of we don't see as many tourists once the Cal Poly starts, and then we've got the students coming back. But it's kind of a different vibe, or it's a different feel. I think that is.
Right. And which one do you prefer? Do you prefer tourist season, lots of people here, summer, or do you prefer students and this fall vibe?
So you know what I think? And people always ask me that about my job too. Like, how do you do 2 jobs? Which one do you prefer the most? And I can never say which one I prefer the most. And
it's like your kids, right?
Right. And what I usually say is that the 2 jobs are really cool because one sort of bounces off the other, right? Mm-hmm. Or if I'm having a bad day at one, I usually have a good day at the other. Or if I'm kind of frustrated with whatever's going on drama-wise at one, the other one's going smoothly. And so it's kind of nice to balance each other out. I think the same thing about summer. Like summer, it comes with its own set of problems and its own set of positives. You get to, once you're kind of tired of the whole school year, you get to experience the summer. It's a different feel, a different vibe, different people coming in. And then when school starts, it changes up. I just like the change. I don't think that one is preferential.
Which one of your jobs is going better? I just tried to get you. I tried to lure you into a trap there.
I'm trying to stay out of trouble as much as possible.
I agree with you. What's interesting is people think like, oh, Richard and David never agree. We actually agree on so many things. Just on air is just a nice little thing to do. Yeah. But I agree with you. I think I happen to live in the interior valleys, and I usually reach this point with like summertime weather. Like I've had enough. I've had enough of the tourists. I've had enough of the heat. I want to not run the air conditioning. There's usually this time where you don't have to run anything, like windows can be open and all that stuff, and it's wonderful. But like getting to your point about the vibe, it seems like in summertime it seems more frenzied to me, and in fall it just seems like it throttles back a little before winter weather, which is just a different thing for me.
It's kind of the opposite for me, right? Because my life picks up when I have the other job, when I'm doing both jobs. So it's a little more frenzied for me personally, but I agree with you. Like the overall kind of feel is a little more laid back.
Yeah. So it is cool, and it's great to have all the students back. Farmers Market has a completely different vibe and all that stuff, and that's great. So we're curious though how you feel about the seasonal changes around here.
I sense that probably people feel really strongly one way or the other. Right, they either really like the students to come back or they really don't.
Yeah. And Because every year it's so funny. We have the same problems that happen every single year because we're inculcating a whole new group of people onto what it's like to be here on the Central Coast. And yeah, we have some local kids, but obviously we import a lot of new folks. And it's interesting. Another interesting element of that is that here at the station we cover Wow Week. Well, Wow.
Yeah.
Week of Welcome. Week. You don't say the second one, although I just did. That story. Well, I've been here 21 years.
And we've probably covered at least 21.
Yeah, it's so hard for me not to tire of the story. But again, for everybody who's new to town, we need to cover the story, and there you go. Yep. Okay, so in part of that, we were talking about summer foods versus fall foods. So do you have a summer food, fall food thing, or do you just eat the same all the time?
I kind of eat the same all the time. I'm kind of a picky eater, and I like to try things, but I tend to be somebody who's in my routine. So it doesn't really change summer or fall.
So
I'm not like a pumpkin spice. I'm not like, oh my gosh, it's fall.
Well, that's where I was going. It's like, so the pumpkin spice thing, this is one where like I actually do kind of like the pumpkin spice thing. It's completely out of control. And I think we do this with everything in society right now. It's like there's a thing and then you have to make it like the biggest thing ever, right? So TikTok, a few people start dancing now, everybody dances. And
I think we're a little bit too responsive. We've had a couple of stories in the last couple of days and we just did one about caviar and Pringles, right? And they're marketing a whole new combination collection of Pringles and caviar because somebody's been doing it or people have been doing it on TikTok, combining those two things. So then the company responds. I think that companies take it a bit too far. We were talking, now I can't remember what we've already talked about and what we talked about yesterday.
Doesn't matter.
I was going to bring up like the pumpkin spice thing, right? It's like a Starbucks thing where Starbucks is a pumpkin spice and every coffee shop's doing pumpkin spice. But we ran a story yesterday about the fact that Starbucks is thinking about eliminating disposable cups altogether, right? But I think, I'm being careful how I say this, but I don't mind companies being environmentally friendly. I like that, right? And when you can use a reusable cup, and that's better than a disposable cup every single time. But I think when you go too far with the rule, then you go too far with that kind of an environmental approach, I think what's going to happen is people are going to be going to Starbucks and they're going to think, if they really eliminate all disposable cups, when they would have normally stopped and gone in to buy a coffee, if they don't have their reusable cup with them, they're not going to want to buy another reusable cup. And I think that will ultimately stop people from going to Starbucks more than it's going to bring them in.
So I agree. And I actually think we just keep nibbling at the edges of everything. Housing, it's a little more expensive. Going out is a little more expensive. Used to tip 15%. Now it's 18%. Yeah. Now it's 20%. And I ultimately think it does affect decisions a little by a little by a little. Yeah. But ultimately, I think it results in kind of a shrinkage of what we're doing. I mean, today, one of the stories was X wants to charge. I think they're proposing something like $8 a month.
Right. But and behind it, like what they said for a reason, right, is because it's going to eliminate bots in the sense that no one's going to pay to create a fake account. Right. If you're going to pay, you really want an account. But that's going to eliminate a certain amount of the audience.
I think it's going to eliminate a huge chunk of it. I mean, if you look at...
Yeah, I'm not going to pay for eggs.
No, and here's the thing. For news people, and I think maybe a lot of you out there might be more Facebook people, which is kind of what we encounter a lot where we share this. But for media people and science people, it has been this great commons for a long time. And I think that's why there was so much concern about how would Elon manage the space, because there was no competing space. Mastodon tried it. It didn't really work. Threads launched. The problem with Threads was you needed to have a mobile phone to do the posting. Now Threads you can do through a website. I think, this is just a suspicion, I think there's so little interest in paying for social media networks. This could be the thing. This could be the thing that gets some other company off the ground. It might be Threads. I think Threads is well positioned, but I do think something is going to be a competing space. And if you don't think it can happen, just think about the ubiquity of like Redbox or Blockbuster or
I think honestly
MySpace.
That people are getting tired of being sort of
nickel and dimed everywhere.
And if you think about it, right, we've got we're living that in television right now again. Everybody jumped on streaming services and cut the cable because it was cheaper, right? I can get Hulu for, originally it was like $5 a month or $7 a month or whatever it is, for the ad-supported version of Hulu. But then all those companies were operating at a loss to get people to come in, and now they've got to operate at a profit because you can't lose money forever. So now people who cut the cable cord are paying more for all of their combined streaming services, and they're all going up, right? So even Hulu Live is going up again, I think, to like more than cable, maybe like $60 or $70.
So, Netflix canceled the subscription sharing unless you pay a premium. So I think people, again, it's a nibbling at the edges thing. And I do think people pare down. And by the way, that's what I was working on prior to us doing the latest newscast. I actually quit Spotify because I have YouTube Premium, which also offers you music. Right. I was double paying.
But I think people forget about that too, right? Because I'm a Amazon Prime member, which also includes movies and music. Right. But I also pay for other streaming services. I shouldn't really have to.
But, it goes back to, okay, so now you got to buy the cup with the thing and you got to pay the 18%, not the 15%.
But what just popped into my mind, and so I've got to talk the other side of it, just because I'm used to doing that, right? Like there's another side. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing ever when stores were forced to not give you free bags and they're going to charge you 10 cents, right?
Oh, it didn't, yeah, you're right.
And I was carrying a bag, and eventually I thought, this is the dumbest thing. Well, I have to carry bags, I'm going to forget them. It forced me to bring my own bags, and I don't mind bringing my own bags.
Oh,
now. So sometimes I think the initial reaction to everything is like, oh, it's ridiculous. But sometimes it works. Sometimes it's ridiculous. Sometimes it works.
I'm going to guess that Twitter isn't going to work. I think bags,
I agree with you,
or not paper bags, but paying for bags worked. Initially I had tons of bags in the back of my car. Yeah. And
I think it's working less so now. I think more and more people are just willing to pay the 10 cents.
That's what I do. I pay the 10 cents, but it does allow, I use the bags for various things, dog waste and whatnot around the house. So it all ends up working out. So one of the things we talked about yesterday, common viewer questions and complaints. But the questions one, when do we work?
Yeah.
Who does our makeup? What kind of advice do we get about our clothing?
So I think one of the biggest problems is that people don't really look at this as a job. Now, I'm not going to complain about my job because I think this is, I just had this conversation yesterday in the newsroom.
You're going to stop doing that today?
No, well, I always complain. I'm going to complain a little less. I'm trying to find the positives of these things.
Okay, wow.
So I back to my school thing, it reminds me, every time I start thinking to myself, oh, I hate this shift that I'm on. I don't want to work till midnight every night. I go to school and I'm teaching these students who would give anything for their dream career. And it reminds me that I felt like that at one point in time too.
Okay.
So I'm not complaining about this career or this job in the sense that not very many people get to do it. I get to be a person who does it, but it's a job, right? And I don't think people look at something like television where they're not doing it, so they don't understand it, and they forget that it's just like any other job, right? It's like if you worked in corporate America, if you worked at a bank, if you worked at PG&E, if you worked at a prison, right? We're scheduled to come in at a certain time, we get off at a certain time, we have a lunch break just like everybody else. Sometimes I love going to work, I want to mess around, I've got something to tell you, I want to chat with you, and sometimes it's like I don't feel like going to work like everybody else doesn't feel like going to work.
Absolutely.
And it isn't, people think that we walk in here, it's like walking like a TV show or something, like we walk in and I put my arms out, somebody's putting a jacket on me, and I sit down in the makeup chair and somebody's doing my hair. And it's not like I'm the makeup person. Yeah. Everybody's their own makeup person.
It's like the production crew on this podcast.
Yeah, there's nobody back there.
It's threadbare. And what is really interesting has become actually more interesting, and we'll talk about it as more developments happen. We are busy from literally the second we walk in the door, and I'm not being figurative. We get in here, it's immediately checking a script or two and being on air ready.
Yeah, the first time I'm on, so my set arrival time is 2:45 p.m. First time on the air is 3.
Yep.
With some updates and some teases, and then we have a 4 o'clock show, a 5 o'clock show, 6 o'clock show. We record stuff for what's it called, OTG, so like smart TVs, if you're watching us on Roku or Apple,
it means
or whatever.
Over the top.
Right. And so we do all of that stuff at 7. We come back, we've got, so then we have a lunch break like everybody else does for an hour and come back, and then we've got other stuff to do at 9, 9:30, 10, etc.
It's nonstop. And going back to kind of the history of Richard and I working together, we never used to work together for many, many years. And then when they put us together, it was kind of prior to this frenzy that we have today. And now Richard and I are in the same room for many, many hours on end. And this poor guy has to sit next to me in the newsroom. I have a second office, so I spare you a little bit. Yeah. But people ask, like, who does our makeup? We do our makeup. I happen to buy, people are going to love this, I buy my makeup at Grocery Outlet for $2.99.
Yeah, see,
that's too cheap even for you.
No, well, it's not even, you're going to laugh about this because I admitted this the last time, the one that didn't record, so I might as well admit it again. I actually, I don't want to walk around with makeup, obviously, so I take it off. But I take my makeup off with
Clorox wipes.
It drives everybody crazy.
I mean,
for like 25 years, I've used Clorox wipes every time I take the makeup off.
What's interesting is when he does have any kind of a breakout or anything, what he always says is, well, I'm out of Clorox wipes. I had to use makeup wipes. Like designed.
I know, but I think it really does help. So what I was going to say is,
of course it helps. It's killing every piece of bacteria on your face and everything else.
So it sounds kind of funny after using Clorox wipes for 25 years, but I tend to use like Neutrogena makeup just because I'm worried about what's breaking out and stuff.
Oh, come on. You're going to use Neutrogena makeup and Clorox wipes?
Take it off with the Clorox wipes.
You're trying to find the median.
I get that that's a little weird.
Oh, boy.
But that's true.
So you're not. Well, it's another thing that's kind of interesting. So I go to Grocery Outlet, but Richard and I are also people who happen to peruse.
I go to the 99-cent
store.
I love that
all the time.
Love that place.
If you want to run into us and just have a good conversation,
go to the cheap place.
It's so funny. We are absolutely Stadler and Waldorf. We're cut from the same cloth. So that's kind of interesting as well. Okay, let's dive back into the rundown here.
We completely forgot about we've been talking about.
We did this yesterday. There's a rundown here, and we don't care. What do you have against blank town? What do you have against Los Osos? Why do you hate Los Osos?
I don't hate Los Osos.
Okay.
That's what everybody says.
That's what people say.
Right. So if we don't mention, obviously there's tons of cities. We have to cover our entire license area. We are licensed to serve what's called a designated marketing area, or a DMA. So that's all of San Luis Obispo County and all of Santa Barbara County. We obviously spill over a little bit into Ventura County.
Yeah, it's basically San Miguel on the north.
But it goes a little bit farther than that. Like kind of
Cape
Robert. So it goes into Monterey County, but we don't get credit for the viewers.
And it goes down to Carpinteria.
But that's a lot. So if you say that we are required to serve that entire area, so that's a lot of cities, right? I mean, San Ynez, Buellton, Santa Maria, Lompoc, Atascadero, Templeton, Paso Robles, San Luis Obispo, Oceano, Grover, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we don't mention every single city every single day, someone's mad, and for sure we don't like them.
Right, and that's the thing. This always happens. It's when you zoom in and do hyperlocal, which is kind of a goal of news coverage to talk about your town, what's happening in your street. But the more you do that, the more you exclude everyone else.
Kind of alienating everybody.
So, there's a limited amount of time, and obviously you're trying to branch out into digital realms and all of that stuff. So people often claim that we have like an organized campaign against something. Let me tell you, the word organization in news organization is like military intelligence. Right. You can laugh at it a little bit. We're pretty busy.
Yeah, that's what's kind of weird too. I mean, news is new. But people, you'll call them up to do a story. You want to do an interview, and they're like, "Oh, well, I've got free time 2 days from now at 3:00." No, everybody comes in here and they figure out what they're doing that day. It's called day turn. Like we do almost all day turns, meaning that the story is filmed, edited, written, produced that day for that newscast. Mm-hmm. So we're starting. The earliest we get started on anything is probably 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's all going to air at 4, 5, 6, 7, 11.
Yeah.
And people don't understand that either. That it's just the fact that people think that we have some sort of a master plan. It doesn't work like that.
It's hard to get 10 people in a room at one time with the kind of pace that we're working with right now, and for everybody to agree that this particular town is not going to get. I mean, that conspiracy, you can put that one to bed.
I mean, I hate to admit this on this podcast in case management's watching, because I'm not supposed to ever do this. I should have read everything, but there are times when the first time it's coming out of my mouth and I'm reading it is I'm hearing it for the first time too. So it's not like I people think, oh, you obviously chose every word, you chose all the stories, you chose. No.
Yeah,
there's no way I could do
Well, I think actually in weather, and you did weather for many years here too, it's, you try to mention every town that you can. And even in weather, it's like, well, it's interesting in that this market has changed too. Santa Maria used to have a TV station in Santa Maria. Santa Barbara had a TV station in Santa Barbara. And of course, KSBY has its main station in San Luis Obispo. But the market changed dramatically. KCOY did a sort of co-op with a station in Monterey where they had the anchors in Monterey. They had some local coverage. They really de-emphasized the coverage in Santa Maria. And it absolutely affected their viewership for a while. Then they are working now in the Santa Barbara office. They do have a station in Santa Maria, but they have to kind of for FCC reasons. Right. But KCOY isn't Santa Maria anymore. It's really out of Santa Barbara largely. Now, they've kept quite a few people from their organization, so they still cover the area. But people would say, like, KSBY is San Luis Obispo station. Why are you covering Santa Barbara?
But we're not. I mean, we're that Santa Barbara station.
Like, to his point about the DMA, just because we happen to be based here and our studio is here, we are absolutely invested in all communities. We try to show no favoritism, and we are actually expanding our reporting staff, and we're going to be working very much to try to get everybody more coverage. Now, that is going to affect, going back to the original thing, about how do you balance?
But see, that's it, right? And I think that's a good point, right? It's how do you, what decisions do you make? So some of the stuff is just technology. So even 20 years ago, if we were going to try to go live from Santa Barbara, then that required this big van with this huge mast that went up, and we had to hit a satellite, and or bounce off of a microwave somewhere. And so we just because of the way technology works, we almost were forced to mostly stay within a certain radius of the station because of technology, because of the ability to get out, because of how long it took to travel, how you can get information back to the station, how long it took to edit. We were doing linear editing instead of nonlinear editing. But what we did that because we were still supposed to cover the entire area, but we weren't able to cover the entire area because of technological limitations. So when those limitations are lifted and we're still supposed to cover the entire area, then people are mad because we used to do it a way that was probably not correct.
Right.
Or not as correct. We try to correct that, and then people are mad because we're...
Well, there's one thing, and we will have to do an entire podcast on this. This area is just leave it the same, make no changes. Like, the example I use for that is, cars at the beach at Oceano. If you pitched that we're going to do cars at the beach in Cambria.
It would never...
Oh my gosh, you would never hear the end of it. But you try to take it away from Oceano, and which has been proposed, and you never hear the end of that.
So, but
we're a status quo area. We love the status quo.
But you can argue. I mean, and that's the other thing. We're not sort of allowed to have, nor do I think I should have, strong opinions about any of this stuff. Right? We're supposed to be more like the voice of everybody's opinion.
Sure.
But you can argue. You can frame that story any way you want. Right? So there's also an argument to be made that we have this area set aside for vehicle traffic and all the other areas are not. So if you don't like the vehicle traffic, there's a whole bunch of other coastline that you can go to that don't. And I don't want to get into, I get that that's going to make a lot of people mad because of environmental concerns and damage to the beach areas. But I'm just saying that you can frame this argument a lot of different ways.
But that's why it is a story, right? I mean, that is why, that is what we are here to do. We give voice to the sides, and we cover the outcome, and it is still in flux. I mean, they're still debating.
But that's also the point, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing, is showing you all of the ways to think about this, and then you can decide. We're not supposed to decide for you.
But getting back to how that reflects on us as a station, we have to change. This media environment is changing. There is no option for us to evolve. We must evolve.
True.
Because your attention has shifted. We're doing this podcast. We've never really done anything like this before because we are somewhat constrained about being able to, go into some depth, talking about the edges of some issues. And so that's what we're hoping to do here.
It's so funny that this is taking a totally different...
Yeah, the
one that went into, Neverland, now this is a different podcast.
Okay, so we're going to end up with what I hope is going to be a regular part of the show, and that is, I knew I was old, When
So I brought this up on the one that you're not seeing because we didn't record, but I'm going to bring it up again because I think it's a good. And I was talking to some students today about this when they came for the preview day at Cal Poly. I was in the newsroom yesterday talking to 2 reporters and a producer, and kind of giving them a pep talk about how lucky they are to have this job and to work here, and it's not complain as much. Honestly, is what I was doing. But it dawned on me that of the 3 people in the newsroom that I was talking to, all of them were born after I started working here. So I pointed out to them, I said, for your entire life, from when your mom was pregnant with you to when you were born, you went to elementary school, you went to high school, you went to college, you got a degree, you came and applied for this job, you're working here now. That entire thing happened. I've been at the station doing the same exact thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes you feel really old. Really old.
So I was in the newsroom some time back, and we were talking about when everybody was born. And I said LBJ, and somebody said LeBron James. No, Lyndon Baines Johnson, which I'm not entirely sure anybody knew who he was.
But we're getting to the point where, you can make like a Star Wars reference, and we have people who've never seen no episode of Star Wars.
So a sales guy and I were talking in the break room, and he was at an aircraft company, and he was talking about an engine was open. He goes, "Hey, it's all ball bearings now." And the guy looks at him and just like had no idea what he's talking about. It's a famous part of the movie Fletch. It's a really funny scene, and when you make that reference and it just falls flat, you're old.
Yeah.
And I think we know that time has expired on this episode. So we do want to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future topics for us to tackle, we're all ears for that. And kind of insights, like if we didn't cover something, like you want to know how we do something.
We'll put it on the list, and then we'll just skip it like we did today.
Yeah.
There's tons of stuff we must not have gotten to.
No, we actually did pretty well.
Okay.
Are you happy?
I'm happy.
Yeah, first time for everything. See you next week.